So welcome to day 2. Before we get started, I did want us to recognize that tomorrow is Veterans Day. And for all of those veterans, and if there's veterans here, please raise your hand. Thank you for your service. So it's the morning sessions today. We have 3 sessions. We are starting off with the MASC, or the Media Ad Sales Council. This is the brainchild of my boss, Brenda Hetrick. It is an advocacy group where we, pardon?
There was a long line at the bar.
Oh, okay, long line at the bar. So we started this organization really to bring different organizations together as an advocacy group to talk about the future of the industry and how we could start exchanging ideas on things we can do. So think of it as a council that really takes the mission of the summit and makes it into a formal organization that meets monthly and really discusses the challenges and opportunities that are facing our industry. So with that said, I think Tim Hanlon, I don't know where you are, Tim. You know, I'm blind as a bat.
You don't know who I am? Is that what you said?
He's got to say. No, I just couldn't see you.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We're going to get started.
Do you know who I am? No, okay. Good morning, everybody. I am Tim again. Nice to see you. Most of you, I guess. We're all here yesterday, a few new ones. So as Mark described, MASC is, this is sort of set up as a, I guess sort of we call it a sort of a roundtable, despite the fact that it's in a long, kind of row here, which is okay. But we kind of wanted to kind of give the audience here a little bit of a, kind of an insider's view to like what a typical sort of committee meeting would be. And really this is about kind of internal discussions about various topics, and that is more collaborative, to Mark's point. I mean, the idea of this MASC group is cross-pollination of ideas and trying to unify thoughts on issues that affect everybody, either now or in the future. So this is designed to be somewhat informal in terms of discussion and stuff. So any stilted responses will be severely punished in a manner that will not be described until it might be needed. So please avoid such. And we're also going to encourage people in the audience to have questions for them as well. Again, think of this as a collective of people, and you see all their various backgrounds and stuff. But these are people who you've heard, some of whom you've heard a bit yesterday, some of whom are in organizations that either you're part of or either quote unquote compete with. This is all a spirit of collaboration and stuff. So imagine sort of a cone of silence. How old am I? Yes, get smart. But I saw them on reruns, not originally. This is sort of a conversation amongst friends, shall we say, in a collaborative way. All right, so I want each of you to quickly just identify yourselves. Just to give me name, rank, and we don't do serial numbers anymore. And then I'm going to get right to sort of the toss-up question. Why don't we start here? Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Michael Speisman, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Allen Media Broadcasting.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Brenda Hetrick, President of Matrix.
Good morning. I'm Becky Meyer, Senior Vice President of National Sales for Gray Television.
Al Luscarton, Senior Vice President of Technology and Information Services for Hearst Television.
Melanie Webb, Vice President of Sales Operations for Tegna.
Joe Lampert, Practice Lead at CN Omni Media.
Jennifer Shalabro, I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales Enablement at Nexstar Media Group.
Peter Jones, Head of Local Sales at Premion, owned by Tegna and Gray Broadcast Groups.
Michael Speisman.
See, nobody clapped for Michael. But anyway, okay. What was the clapping there for Tegna? What was that? Personal. Okay. I didn't want to break any news. Allen Media, Tegna, your two companies. I don't know. Who knows? But anyway, run with the rumor as you might like. Okay, so, I was interested yesterday. One of the terms that we did not hear yesterday, which is very interesting, or not a lot of, is this term, and maybe it's antiquated already, rep firms. Let's discuss that, because the idea of a rep firm is embedded, if you will, in the idea of local ad sales, has been for many years. As a former agency buyer, those were the first agencies, the first media sellers I ever met, had some of the best lunches and interesting conversations with those folks, but I digress. But I guess the question really is, what do you think the role of a representational firm is these days, good, bad, or indifferent, and do they have a role? Are they helpful? Is there a trend more to taking some of those functions in-house? And put this against the background of what we talked about yesterday, technology, automation, and that kind of stuff. So what of sort of the rep firm thing? And I know it can be a little indelicate. I mean, the CATS folks are not here. I mean, what of them?
Locality's here, so...
Well, no, I know that. So Ann, I need to remind you, Ann, that locality is now a combined effort and is streaming and it's reps and stuff. Well, okay, why don't you identify yourself?
Ann Heiler, President, Locality Broadcast. Thanks.
So, all right. I was going to wait for a few people to kind of get into this, but the reality is that Locality is already kind of ahead of the game, right? The fact that you rebranded, the fact that you merged a linear rep function historically with Gamut on the streaming side, right, is already, I would argue, a strategically savvy move towards where stuff is evolving, perhaps versus doing none of those things. What do you guys think? Locality specifically, but just generally the role of a rep in all of this. Go ahead.
I will preface that I have actually never sold linear. I'm trying to be objective from a digital side of the business. I've always been in the digital space, but I mean, what I saw with Locality and then also with what Tegna has done, you know, bringing their rep firm in-house, obviously partnering with Premion, I think obviously there's definitely some synergies there, and it's been a pretty good strategy so far.
I would argue that whether you're a rep firm such as Locality or any one of the media organizations here, reinvention has become the order of the day. In an emerging world of multi-platform and audience-based needs, if you are where you were 5 years ago, you're probably not going to be here 5 years from now.
I think I'll pipe in. I spent 25 years at the rep firm, and it was a great place. It was a much different business 25 years ago, as I know Ann can attest to. For our company, we went to a self-represented model in 2016. And we didn't build another rep firm or build a second hop, speaking of like technology. And you know, it's easier if you have the direct pipeline that goes from the customer into the marketplace for us. And keep in mind, we did this when we had 57 markets, and our largest market was Knoxville. When you get into some larger markets, there are some different, you know, things to evaluate and think about. But for us and our company, we felt that nobody could tell our story better than we could, and the speed and the reaching an actual like decision maker that can write a spot on a log, that can, you know, do something and make it happen, that has worked well for our company. But we're all different.
And I'll add to that, to Peter's point, you know, I started my career at a rep firm as well, at Blair Television. And for Tegna, I believe it's more about a one go-to-market strategy, one vision. You can train and coach all of the sellers together to go on that mission to position the portfolio at scale. And so I think that's the biggest benefit that we see to having our national sales in-house.
Well, okay, before you go further,
Wait.
before you go further, Michael, hold on a second. I also though want to just remember why the rep firm function exists in the first place, right? Because none of these entities here and television station groups at all have quote-unquote national footprints per se, right? At least on the station level, right? So there's a whole bunch of advantages to being able to have a third party kind of having access to various things to put together regional or national kinds of setups that an individual station group can't do by themselves. Michael.
So I'll comment. I worked with Becky for all of her 25 years and had 5 additional years at Katz. And I am a fan of the rep firm concept. There is no question that it needs to evolve. I think for the folks on this dais that have gone to self-repping, each of these companies have approached it in very, very different ways for very, very different reasons. And this is not the place to debate the whys and wherefores of the personalities, the footprint, the portfolio, and so forth. But we are in 21 markets. We have an unbelievably successful relationship with our rep firm. Part of it is perhaps because of my background in it, but there is no question looking forward, there are going to have to be significant changes. Now, having said that, if you're going to ask your rep to do something, you have to compensate them to do it. We talked yesterday about how compensation needs to be tied to what you're looking to achieve. If your expectation is that a rep is going to do A, B, and C, but you're only going to pay them X, Y, and Z, it's dead on arrival. So I think that there's some dirt on the hands of all parties in this. And from my perspective, there is nothing similar. I mean, we have similarities between the Allen Media Group stations. They're all significant contributors to their communities. We all do, 50 hours of news a week and on and on and on. But there's nothing similar about Huntsville, Alabama, and Eugene, Oregon, and in real life. And I don't know if you people would argue with me on that. So what I will tell you is that the input that we get from our reps who get to see every affiliation, every ownership group, et cetera, has been beneficial. So Ann, I got your back.
I wanted to jump in from the technology or vendor perspective and Matrix CRM revenue management tool. And we work with clients that don't have rep firms, and we work with clients that do. The technology needs to improve, the interactions need to improve, and we certainly have integrations with the rep firms. But from a pure sales perspective, there needs to be a better visibility into the revenue, into the forecasting, into one system. We're fortunate that we do have relationships with Locality and CATS, that we do have APIs, and we get that. But the national or the unrepped or the direct to their market sells is a different sell than a local AE out busting their butts for business, and they need a seamless workflow, and we've built that thanks to our partnerships with non-repped clients. But in general, that whole process, and I know this is something Ann would agree with me, that whole process needs to be improved from a technology ecosystem standpoint.
I'm going to bring Ann to have a conversation, to have some thoughts too. But I also, though, want to reframe this too as not just a linear television sales proposition, right? There is this thing called streaming, which we spent a ton of time on yesterday. There is plenty of digital doodads and widgets and all those kinds of things that sellers are being asked to sort of bring into the mix. And we've debated sort of do you add them on? Are they their own unique propositions? Yes to all of that, right? Does a third party help or hinder those kinds of things as well? I mean, again, let's be honest. I think I said this yesterday. I can go on Tubi today and go into their fast channel lineup, and I can see dozens and dozens of TV channel news loops / whatever expressions of themselves. And it doesn't take more than 5 minutes to sort of see ad breaks that are slates, right? To the outsider, which is me raising my hand, that seems like a natural place for a third party to at least scoop that stuff up while the station groups and all those folks try to figure out how to fill those pieces. Discuss, and then I'll have Ann chime in.
I might jump in there as a outside, non-biased party. I think it can help, it can hurt. That's the attorney answer, right? It works, it doesn't work. In the sense of I hear what you're saying, but on the other side, if I'm running a station group and I'm looking at my digital sales, that may, if it's not already, it might become my leader. And it might be what I'm actually selling first and then starting to add the other services on top of that. And so if I'm running the station, I want to have that insight to be able to understand, why are they actually buying me? Like, are they looking for the digital or the streaming first? And then I can convince them, hey, buy some linear. I know linear, traditional linear is still the bulk of the revenue, but at some point there may be that switch. And so the question may be, how much of that do I want to know and control? Conversely, of course, depending on the group, if they're not there yet, a third party could help them get a lot more business in that space.
I'm going to let you all move on after we beat this to a dead horse. But we had some really good conversations yesterday about what does the buy side need. And I promise everyone in this room, if we are not looking at ways to make access to local inventory easier and more comprehensive, every single content owner that cannot find a way to collaborate, I hope it's through a rep firm. I hope that there is a way to put local content into the hands of national brands, because national brands are moving on. And if we don't find a way to take your rich local content and allow the buy side to do it, and since almost every single person up on that panel right there is a current or former client, there might be ways we all work together through something known as locality or through some other third party that allows that to happen. At the local level, there is, I need you to do it with me. We had a really good conversation yesterday. But now, Tim, you can have the mic back.
Look, that's truth, right? Right there. Right? That's not, streamers are very capable of going much more granular, right? Z+4 clusters, give me your list, boom. There's no local intermediary there, right?
Well, but and I think to Mike's point, I mean, the institutional knowledge that the rep firms have of just the individual markets and the stations that represent those markets, you can't go to a Tubi and know that Birmingham or Eugene or whatever the example was, you're going to get the same inventory, the same ads, so you need someone that can actually guide or navigate not just the streaming space, but also the linear space. It's not one or the other. It's a total TV buy. I mean, that's what, or I'd like to hear from the the buy side, but that's how we look at it. And so that's, I think, how Tegna's done a great job with Gray and Premion. And I think obviously the way that Locality has set it up. I mean, the buyers, from what I see, and from even the advertisers themselves, they need that knowledge and that team to help them navigate it.
Can you guys prioritize for me some of the ad tech processes, efficiencies that you'd like to see sooner rather than later? I mean, what Ann brings up, right, is a very important one. In the realm of streaming, right, it seems to me like there's plenty of opportunities to streamline, aggregate, make more data-centric, that kind of stuff, either to help linear sellers or to adjunct to or with linear sellers, amongst all kinds of other things. So technologies, solutions, I mean, we talked about automation. I mean, that's been kind of on the launching pad for 10 years. But what's jobs number 1 and 2 in terms of wave the magic wand and let's get X done ASAP?
Well, I think what we've been focused on for a number of years was interoperability across the supply chain. And what we're beginning to see is the need for interoperability within each organization's, shall I say, pitch to pay architecture, where each media organization may be dealing with a half dozen or more applications, getting them from the initial pitch on through to bill pay. We're seeing the need, and we're beginning to see the openness for open integration and open APIs to connect those pieces and to remove a lot of the internal friction and churn. And I would say that if you're working with players who continue to promote a closed architecture, you probably should be pushing them harder or thinking about players that are more open in their approach. But we are beginning to see more openness to open architecture across the ecosystem.
I think the fundamental issue becomes that the currency in our business is going to change. And we know we're selling cross-platform. To us, the focus has been on the unified front end that'll allow the sellers to have a platform where they can transact on any currency, on any platform. And I think that's where the focus has been. And what goes along with that are tools that our sellers are going to need to figure out how to price their sales and how to place the inventory. And all the systems on the back end will be there, and they need to all talk to one another, but there needs to be something that brings them all together, and that's going to be the catalyst, I think, that creates the automation and efficiency.
And I think the ability to do multiple market buying and selling is very important, because the legacy systems that were set up to be, you know, a one-to-one, like one station goes in and accesses their stuff. We've been on the hunt for a long time of, if Heather comes to me and says, I want to buy these 10 states, put something together, it's kind of chisel and stone a little bit, to be quite honest with you. So
I would second that.
that's my job. That's my number one thing, and a pending report.
I would second that. I think, not only the ability to look at audience sales versus program sales, the fluidity between our systems in terms of selling an impression means it can run on television or on digital streaming. That fluidity and that acceptance by the agencies to say, this is okay, we can make good here, we can make good there, that would be amazing.
So what about like potential partnerships and relationships with other entities out there? I mean, look, I'll give you an example, right, of some of these major national streamers, right, that have the capability, right, of going to marketers directly or their agencies and essentially doing Zip+4 clusters and localizing the ad deliveries in those environments, right? But what's to stop the opposite approach, right, from the local stewards, if you will, the historical local brands of television stations, right, going upstream, if you will, and creating sort of, I won't call it a protective moat, but sort of the local market brand proposition, right, that makes it more than just an exercise in finding the right target cluster, right? It's one thing to find a granular Zip+4 and serve an ad, right? It's quite another to do it with some level of judiciousness and understanding and brand friendliness with a notion of what that local marketplace is versus just the right national ad in the right cluster. I guess the question there is there a new sales proposition or solution that local stations, if you will, can evolve to that maybe meets these national streamers in the middle to kind of maybe receive the local proposition, but maybe concierge them a little bit better and a lot more robustly, given all the experience that you guys have had over the decades?
I think there's I'll just bring up a point. I think there's a tough place we're in as local media between truly pitching the value proposition of that local, talent-focused, relationship that we have with individual audiences, and how important that is, and why our brands are so important to the local marketplace, not only as a community provider, community service provider, but those relationships that our audiences have with our weather guy, our anchor. Those are powerful relationships, and that kind of gets cast aside when you're truly just doing a numbers, audience, DMA targeted approach. So I feel like for my group, we're constantly in this, do we have this more sort of audience-based, DMA-focused, doesn't matter what platform it's on, but does it, because that platform does matter in many cases for performance because of that halo effect that we create. So that's a tough spot to be in, and I think we can do both, but we'll have to do it very carefully.
Look, I'm just thinking of national streamers, I'm thinking of TV operating systems, I'm thinking of all kinds of DSPs and SSPs, right, that are in the middle and the midst of that stuff. You guys are essentially just kind of chucking that aside and you're still selling what you're selling in an advanced way. There's still a translation error, I would argue, right? And arguably, I think to Ann's point, right, if there isn't an evolution of what that sort of bubbled up solution set looks like, nobody's gonna have the time because they're gonna go directly to the spreadsheets and get to the target audience. Go ahead,
But Tim,
Mark.
I think that's really an interesting point. And I hear what you're saying, but to me, that's actually the evolution of the rep firm. So if I'm running a rep firm, that's what I would do, is you actually could become that marketplace for local, and rather than making the deal with broadcasters and taking your cut there, I would take my cut on the buy from the buy side and become that local marketplace, because I know all these different companies, and then I could build a buy for that side of the business and become that marketplace.
So just to comment on that, Keith Kaiserman locality. And I think to Ann's point, from a unification standpoint, and Tim, I think it's a great topic. When we think about the business model of cable, broadcast, satellite, local was protected. There was 2 minutes of inventory. It was based on the affiliate agreements. That disappeared with streaming because it was just national platforms, OEMs, VMPDs. No one was thinking about that because there was this assumption it was automatically addressable and geo-targetable. But it didn't take into consideration the intelligence of that local community. So where we look at, to your point, the broadcast content is important. You know, that's a connective tissue, the engagement and the relationship that the audience has with anchors. But that scale isn't there yet, just on that broadcast content. So having that direct connection, which is mimicking that old cable, satellite, local protected 2 minutes, is what we bring to market. So there are solutions there today that enable advertisers to create that scale locally as that content and audience gravitates to streaming from the broadcast side to streaming. So there's a path there. We just need to lean into it.
Good point. Thoughts? Yeah, look, this is evolutionary change, right? I mean, I know there are restrictions, right? You can't necessarily collaborate with your partners across the street, right? And there are some regulatory issues that might get solved someday that might enable that. But what Mark is describing and what Keith is adding more color to is this idea of some kind of, I call it a marketplace, call it some kind of filtering system, some kind of OS, if you will, local OS, right? That essentially is the kinder, gentler concierge environment that brings more impact to the advertising in the local environments versus just you're in the right household in the right zip code, right? So let's talk about what 2024 looks like for all of you in your respective roles, right? So a lot of that we were just talking about is strategic, but give us some internal sense of like the things that are burning or smoldering on your desks that you will see when you go back to work on Monday that you need to address in the immediate term. And then what do you fear or get excited about for 2024? And you cannot say political, okay? Because we talked about that yesterday. That is just a beautiful wave that's coming over to crash against the beach and make things very good for a period of time that will go away in 2025. So I want to know what you guys are excited about and not excited about. Go ahead, Michael.
To take this a completely different direction, political. No, the reality is you cannot ignore it because you have to deal with your clients that you want to retain through 24 that you will need like oxygen in 25. So being able to completely dismiss it is silly. But I think one of the most important things that we have to do on this panel and probably in every other aspect within our buildings, our stations, is make sure that we are recruiting and enticing people to want to join our business. So we have the sales forces out on the street to be effective promoting our industry first, the smaller industry of local television, and of course our individual stations and companies after that. So probably the most important thing is growing your staff with dedicated, qualified people.
That's definitely an issue, right? Certainly in the newsrooms, we've seen it, right?
That's my point. It's everywhere.
I'm going to say one last thing about political, and then someone else.
See, I'm telling you,
someone else will say something else.
People don't. It's a drug, right? People are addicted to political. I get it. Go.
But to the exact question you posed before about the rep firm and how they're adopting. I mean, next year is the exact reason why you need someone that can help you navigate the political landscape as well as where can I get my buys? Where can I get my audience? Where can I reach them? So I think this is a great example of why there's a need for the rep firms.
The point I was going to add is why you can't ignore it is we're going to upgrade our systems at fourth quarter of this year. We're going to patch them, and then we put a moratorium on any changes till after Election Day next year. So there won't be any kind of radical change or disruption until after the election is over.
Strategically, that's a good thing?
It is a good thing.
Okay, so let's have this conversation in 2025 or this time next year, and let's see how.
That's the discussion.
So I want questions from the audience too. And by the way, there are people in the audience who are not from localities.
Except
but
for
also-
Matrix, you could upgrade any of your Matrix products and renew and.
No, but I think from a
Go ahead.
technology ecosystem ad tech, that is a problem, right? That we punt it because of political, and there still does need to, we still have to move forward on measurement. There's a ton of things that we just cannot punt because it's a political year. Because then we're inefficient one more year. And then we're going to be inefficient in the midterms one more year. And I just think, I get it. It's a ton of money, right? I live in a swing state. It's a ton of money. But it doesn't solve the problems of the ad tech, sales ad tech ecosystem and inefficiencies from pitch to pay, right? That those still need to be solved.
And when you get home, turn on your espresso shot so you receive it every morning. If you don't laugh at that, you obviously don't use Matrix effectively.
I do think one thing that we're all going to be focused on is just the supply path. How are we accessing inventory? I think as an organization or as an industry, we're all trying to combat fraud in the OTT space and the streaming space. So just making sure that we have a supply path with scale that can sustain kind of that, the political environment next year. I mean, we kind of had our first taste during the midterm. I mean, we have a gentleman on our team from Freewheel who said that there were 70 to $80 CPMs. I mean, it's so we just have to kind of control that for our local advertisers and help them navigate it.
I think for us, not to talk about political again, but the demand on inventory means that our sellers locally need something else to sell. So I think for us, it's like really the chance to empower our sellers with the tools, the technology to streamline their processes, make them faster at what they do, create more visibility across our portfolio. Your earlier statement, no one on this panel has a national footprint. We have the CW. We have News Nation, we have The Hill, amongst our 200 television stations. There is a lot of scale available to our teams, and it's figuring out a way to take advantage of that from the ground floor.
I'll say Olympics. I'm excited about Olympics for 24, since no one else said it. That's a place to go. And
Be in an event?
I think we're seeing a really big interest in these
Live
tentpole events,
sports.
and that's what really sports and news are.
Yes, the
keys.
ratings are up for live sports. The rates are up for live sports, and there's a high demand.
You're talking
for
about
it.
the Chicago Bears on the Today Show.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think that's a good guy in 24, and I think that for sure, as Al mentioned, while we might not put in any upgrades to current technology in a political year, there are process improvements and incremental gains that we can make in 24 that I think will help the entire ecosystem. And to the earlier question about what do you want? Converged proposals. That's it. Being able to marry linear and digital together in an easy, fast, and efficient way. I think that will give us light years ahead in making sure we reduce some of that friction in the process.
And I'd say along those lines, many of our clients are coming to the realization that we have a wide array of product and portfolio to support, but are struggling with how do we move to that converged reality structurally within their organizations, with the systems that support that, with the processes, with the training, with the personnel that can speak with fluency across the advantages of digital versus linear and how all that comes together in a converged package. So I think that struggle still exists today. and we're beginning to see more attention paid towards it.
I'll double click on the tentpole events. I mean, if you think about, or sorry, even just sports in general, I think the demand is almost at an all-time high. We have new leagues that are starting up. Does anyone know what's happening next week? The Las Vegas F1 race?
Yes.
I mean, I think that's going to be probably one of the biggest races of the year. This is the first year, so this is what anyone know about Formula One? We have 3 races now, but just monsters. So I think we're going to continue to see sports. The demand for sports just stay high.
Okay, so I'm going to ask my question now. Sorry. I'm Alan Walk, you all know, from TV Rev. You all know me. So everybody from Amazon to Paramount now is either launching or about to launch a self-serve product that's aimed at small and medium businesses. Do you guys see that as a potential threat, a potential opportunity? Because you can upsell a little bit of both, and how do you turn it into an opportunity?
I'll chime in here just because of, I mean, back in 2005, I was doing Google search campaigns for businesses that weren't leaving print newspaper or weren't leaving, the yellow pages. I think the self-serve model, it's almost like the gateway drug, right? So Hulu did it, Facebook did it, but you know how many of, especially the local businesses, they test it out, they throw $1,000 at it, they don't see anything. So they need someone that can help them. This is how you build a campaign. I mean, I literally was on a call 2 weeks ago with a very, very large e-commerce brand that you guys are all familiar with, helping them navigate their own DSP because they were seeing $45 CPMs and they couldn't bring it down. And this was a very sophisticated programmatic team. So I don't think the SMBs or the self-serve model, I think it introduces them to it. It allows them to kind of get comfortable or familiar with it. But again, maybe bigger companies, agencies might be able to manage it internally, but for a lot of our clients, especially on the local end, mostly on the local end, I don't think they're gonna, I mean, it might be a bad taste in their mouth if they use it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've seen it, we've tried it in past companies, and it comes down to they get a taste, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know how to apply creative, they don't know how to measure results or create KPIs that make sense, and then it doesn't work, and then they abandon, and then they come back to us and say, what can you do to help?
So in the
That's not
programmatic world,
expertise.
right, that's called managed service, right? So it sounds like you're arguing for managed service, and if you take some of the comments we said earlier, right, the upgrading of what you quote unquote sell into more managed service and convincing people that has value, will save money, and be more effective. That seems to me like a winning proposition, right? But
If you can blend your owned and operated with that business, because if you don't do that, you end up in a low margin, high expense, churn out business.
Right. I guess the question though is, hold on, Peter. The question though there is, I'm not sure many buyers, advertising agencies, and marketers care about owned and operated versus whatever. They just want solutions. I think that's really the issue. And actually, I want to ask this sort of as a last general question. Hold on a second. Hold on. Is the what you're looking for from buyers, right, to make your jobs easier? Because you clearly can't just be in the inventory sales business anymore, because the solutions and the complexities are just getting to be too much, and you just evidenced that by those comments. Go ahead, Mike.
So my comment on that, yes, while our obligation is to have positive results for our clients, which means whatever mix of digital products or otherwise they require to be successful, we will sell them. The good news about the O&O for O&O products for local television stations, particularly the ones probably on this panel, is that we are some of the highest trafficked local activity in the marketplace. So not only is the O&O higher margin business for local television stations, but it's also highly effective for advertisers because it's the big game in town. Doesn't mean you don't offer and support your advertisers with whatever they're looking for, even if it is lower margin. You give them what they need. The good news is that if you wait it out, the O&O tends to stand up. And the other point I was going to make earlier about the self-service idea is, like Doctors Without Borders, the beauty of digital for local stations is it's digital without borders of the DMA. Am I allowed to use the term DMA? Okay. So, it gives us opportunities way beyond the geographic boundaries of our markets, which is a tremendous opportunity for us.
So I'd like to pick up on a comment from Peter on F1 racing. Does anyone know what the major driver of the massive uptick in F1 popularity has been over the past 2 years? Netflix. So an interesting opportunity to look at these streamers not as the competition, but how do you leverage the drive in their popularity on a local basis to not ignore, but to say, okay, how do we leverage and exploit the opportunity driven by, in this case, F1?
Well, sorry, two quick thoughts, but so the F1 was obviously Netflix. If you guys saw, they also did Full Swing for golf. They did Breakpoint for tennis. So they keep kind of following that model, which I think is to your point, good. Tim, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. You said, you made a statement, managed service is cheaper. Did you say that? Or no, you said managed?
I said more of it could be a more, yes, it could be a more, you were talking about how inefficient and they spend a couple of $1,000s and they don't. I'm saying managed service could be a solution that makes that process easier so they're confident that those dollars are getting more.
And I'm more than happy to take this conversation offline, but I think that there is a perception that self-serve is cheaper and that managed service is more expensive. Well, when advertisers waste thousands of dollars on a self-serve model because they don't know what they're doing, it's not cheaper. You know, agencies bring it in-house or a client brings it in-house. You know, if a client brings their own campaigns in-house, they have, 2 headcount that's running the campaign. How many campaigns have they run? A dozen, 20?
Let me throw something else in there.
Yeah.
So one of the things when I talk to those guys, their thought is, we're going to get all the people who don't currently advertise on TV. In other words, they're not stealing your customer. They're not taking your current customers. They're like, we're going to bring new brands in, people who never thought they could advertise on TV, especially somebody like Amazon, where they're used to sort of, doing digital. Like, so how do you, grab those people and say, hey, basically give them the message that you just said now, that, the managed service, it's not cheaper and managed service is going to be better.
Everyone up here already has that covered. Every broadcast grouub up here, they have access, they have their own platform, they have their own DSP or partner that they use that can reach all the same audiences that
How do you find those? In other words, do you guys have plans to kind of go, oh, this company which is in our market, which we've never talked to before, suddenly they're running TV ads through Amazon?
Yeah, I would say that, look, this is nothing new. Does anyone remember Spot Runner?
Yeah.
I mean, right?
All the time, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, this is not a new concept. If it was that easy to be done, if it was that attractive, we would see an uptick and we'd see adoption in that area. So I just don't buy it personally.
Okay, Alan, I like this banter. So I did this last year, for those that were here last year. Who in this room has Prime TV? Okay. Who in this room has Freebie or has watched Freebie? Okay, that number just drastically went down. How many people in this room watch MGM Plus? Exactly. All of those are Amazon streaming platforms. So, is this being recorded? I love Amazon. Amazon is a great company, but obviously there's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of, that's why I think we need the broadcast groups to help our clients navigate that space. Thanks
I
for
had a
humoring me with
self-serve
that.
question, but Alan asked it. So I'm switching to a media planner question. I wondered, do the clients that you guys interact with, do they ask you for or understand sort of the media research concept of only both, where you can show them the reach and frequency and delivery, linear, nonlinear, and together to get the incrementality? Does that come up, or is that still, only the national agencies are going into something like that?
For us, that does not come up a lot, Hugh. We have not run into that, where we've got direct relationships where we put both together and we kind of act as the agency. We haven't, but I think it's going to be here. We're going to see that more, that issue.
We actually go out and sell with that. We do sell with that. We coach our sellers to look at a digital lift, to get exposure, to sell, cross-sell our other platforms.
Okay, so we are at the end of our time. This is fun, right? It's not necessarily, right? These are issues that are internally and externally grappled with, right? But this is exactly the kind of conversation, and yeah, with a couple little points here and there to kind of jab people into reacting into thinking, right? The idea is collaboration, right? I think even in all these responses that you heard, right, the ability for folks to be more commonly aligned is pretty darn crucial, because we've heard and discussed some of the existential threats, the issues, the dependencies, shall we say, of certain things. That's the whole idea behind what a MASC is, and I'm not going to do any recruiting on behalf of Brenda, but I'm sure you're always looking for wise souls to also join the conversation, and not just once a year, but on a regular basis to kind of tackle some of these sometimes uncomfortable truths and realities and mutual needs. So that's the spirit of this conversation. Thank you all for listening and participating in it. And thank you for being on the panel.